nervous because I'm here now.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin. I'm here with my co-host, James Haskell. And in this episode, we're discussing the obvious reality, I guess, or the expected reality that the preseason has been shortened by 2 games. They decided to eliminate the first and fourth preseason games. So let me see. The Bills are being eliminated and the Redskins are being eliminated. Is that right? So who's left, Jimmy? Who we still playing?
Yeah, so we're still playing the Cowboys. So the 2 games are as follows. We'll have the Cowboys on Saturday, August 22nd, and then we will have the Panthers August 30th on a Sunday. So the Cowboys game, we will travel to Dallas. Theoretically, Texas isn't doing too great right now, but theoretically speaking, somehow we'll be in Dallas. Actually, Arlington. And then the second game will be at home against the Panthers. So we'll only have 1 home game. You know, just as an aside, I'm interested to see what those preseason tickets are going to be now since there's only 2.
Yeah. And also, what will I guess we still won't know what the fans will look like in the stands.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. Maybe it'll be none. It'll just be on TV.
Yeah.
But
well,
I want to ask you this, Glenn.
Yeah.
The streak, right? You know what streak I'm talking about. The streak of undrafted rookies making the roster, the initial roster starting the season for the Ravens has been 16 years. It's an incredible statistic. The streak is something that is worth talking about. The streak that I'm referring to is the one of 16 years in which the Ravens have kept an undrafted rookie on the active roster, on the initial active roster. 16 years long. I mean, that's incredible. I'm sure undrafted rookies want to go to the Ravens because they all know about that statistic. But this year, it seems even more like an uphill battle than it normally is. Do you think that this is the end?
I think that this is certainly the most uphill battle that any rookie really has ever faced going into a training camp when they're fighting for any type of playing time or even a roster spot. But I will say this: there is one position in which I feel like there is an opportunity there, and that's the only reason why I feel like that this streak can and will continue. But I will say this: if neither one of the position I'm referring to is tight end, and if neither one of the young guys who came in, being Breland and I can't recall,
Kid out of Georgia.
Yeah, I can't recall the other guy's name right offhand. I guess I should have that in front of me. But if neither one of them two, come out and impress, then Charles Scarf's going to end up taking that job, and then we could end up with a situation where that streak is ended. Now, I guess the question is, it's a streak that they're proud of and a streak that they use to lure any of the big-time potential free agent rookies that weren't selected in the draft for whatever reason, whether that be off-the-field stuff or injury stuff or even some performance. But usually if it's a big-time rookie who's not drafted, it's for other reasons, if they're fighting for him, which most teams do. And I think that the Ravens use that streak as a way to get people to come here. But let me ask you, do you really think if, say, that the shortened camp, the shortened preseason affects that, do you think that this is something that agents or future rookie free agents would hold against the Ravens for breaking that streak for just this season, and then they could easily pick it back up next year?
No, I don't think that's anything that would be held against the Ravens. And their future chances of getting the best, or using that as a ploy, at least like as a tactic, chip. Right, to get the best undrafted rookies in camp. I don't think so at all, because statistically speaking, your chances are still better here than essentially anywhere else, depending on fit, of course. But the one thing I was going to say is Eli Wolf is the name of the guy out of Georgia. I just looked it up for you. But the other thing I was going to say too is everybody was really high on our boy Steiner, the running back out of Kennesaw State. Is that how you say it correctly?
I don't know if it's Kennesaw or Kennesaw. Yeah.
Bronson Rick Steiner out of Kennesaw State. And look, guys, for all of you that were hoping that he would take Ricard's position or somehow get a seat in the running back room throughout the season, I think that's been put to bed unless he absolutely wows in a really short time period. But I agree with you that the tight ends is the most likely position. But I kind of want to turn the page and talk about another thing here. As far as strategy goes and prepping for the season, which is what's most important, right?
Yeah.
How do you see this playing out? Because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, last year Lamar played in the first 2 preseason games,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then he didn't play in the third and the fourth. He didn't
Well, I
follow
know
the traditional trajectory.
right, and that tradition is kind of being pushed to the wayside here as of late. You see teams like the Rams didn't play a single big name starter in the entire preseason, and that really didn't show at least early success. I don't think that preseason is as valuable as it once was, but this season it might be because we saw other teams using the joint practices as a way to get valuable snaps against opponents without having the game setting where it can be kind of time constraint. You're trying to force guys in, you're trying to fit guys in, get reps for this guy and that guy. Whereas in a joint practice, you can put a 4 against the other team's 1, or you can put a 3 against the other team's 1 and see what they got. You don't have that luxury in preseason games, but you did in the joint practice. But now this year, there is no joint practices. So your only option to get time against an opponent is in the preseason. So, yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they divide up the snaps, because I think it's going to be important in this offense to at least give the starters some reps in one of the 2 preseason games. I just really do. Without the joint practices and the ability to take on any opponent in practice, you have to have those simulated game reps as close, as you can to the regular season. And that's the only way to do it. So I do think there will be some. Now, how much? I think it'll still be very limited. And it may only be in the first preseason game, but I do think we will see Lamar and the rest of the big name starters at some point.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I tend to agree with you, which makes sense because, you're a very logical thinker. Generally, according to some people, you're perfect. So
inside jokes.
But
I'm clearly not, by the way.
Depends on who you ask. But this is what I will say. I think that I agree with you. I think that we will see Lamar. However, I do think, like you said, our usage will be limited because of the consistency we have largely in the offense. I think for other teams, their approach will be a little different if they have a lot of moving parts. For example, this might be weird, but I could see Tampa Bay getting some good action in because they have a lot of moving parts. And the other thing is, like you said, I think last year those joint practices were a better simulation of like live play than the preseason games, but it's gone by the wayside now. So those preseason games are really going to be heightened as far as intensity, importance. The simulation of a live game will be much more accurate than it was last year. Now, I have one more question for you, and I don't want to think about this, but I think it's appropriate for the conversation. Is this a precursor to potentially a shortened season?
Wow. Well, I certainly hope not. I think the shortened preseason was something that we all expected for quite some time, and right. I think it's something that will continue going forward even long after the pandemic is in our rearview mirror. The preseason, they've been wanting to get this shortened for a long time. So I don't think you start a season if you have the plan of cutting it short. I don't think so it would have to be circumstances where there's so many issues of people getting sick, and really more so, I think, on the coaching and front office is the people who should be more concerned. These are men who are older in age. They work a lot of hours. They probably don't get a lot of sleep. They're probably more vulnerable. The athletes, they would probably be just fine, judging from what I'm hearing experts say, obviously. But so I don't think you go into this season and expect that no one is going to test positive at some point with COVID. And then the question is, how well do they quarantine? How well do they isolate? And how well do they contain the virus from spreading? Because, yeah, I guess if it were to become a huge problem and spread throughout locker rooms, then it's a possibility. But I have confidence that the NFL, the amount of money that the NFL has, that they will figure out a way to be prepared for a situation where if a player is to test positive, that he is isolated and quarantined away from the team. But it's going to be tough because these are grown men with a lot of money, and they're going to get stir crazy if the NFL thinks that they're going to keep them in this bubble where they're sitting in their room, playing on their tablets and playing video games.
Yeah, I know. I think that's just it's definitely an interesting thought, but one that we don't want to think about. But there is something that I do want to mention for all of our viewers out there. Really excited to have an old friend back on the show. Joshua Harris, Lamar Jackson's personal quarterback coach, will be on the show here tomorrow evening. So make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Really excited to have Josh on to get his insight. Talk about Lamar's growth between an unanimous MVP season to what's going to happen next. Crazy to think that he hasn't hit his ceiling yet. But like I said, take a minute, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and get excited for that as well. We will be back soon.
See you.